Is America's war on Iran going to be Donald Trump's biggest mistake? Iran is daring America to send ground troops. And here, speaking in Delhi, Iran's deputy foreign minister quipped that Trump wants to choose the next leader of Iran. He can't even get to decide who will be the next mayor of New York. Amid the ongoing crisis, America has mysteriously offered a waiver to India for the purchase of Russian oil. For the record, India never stopped the purchase of Russian oil. In February, Russia remained India's largest supplier of crude. But of course, the chickens, the proverbial chickens, are coming home to roost. The war is hurting the global oil trade, oil prices are going up, and obviously, America is now concerned about oil prices globally and how that might impact both the global and the American economy. But is this just waiving one form of American unilateralism, the weaponizing of tariffs, for another form of American unilateralism, the war on Iran, which Indians may still have felt two steps removed from, till an Iranian warship was sunk by an American nuclear submarine in the Indian Ocean? On the program today, we'll be talking to experts from around the world to ask this one fundamental question. Has Trump started a war that he does not know how to manage or end? I'm Barkha. You're with the Mojo Story. These images that are about to come up on your screen show how Sri Lanka swung into action, an action that was in fact aided and supplemented by India's Navy when Iran's warship IRIS Dena was sunk by a US nuclear submarine right in our backyard off the coast of Sri Lanka. The ship was in international waters, but it was within the EEZ, the exclusive economic zone of Sri Lanka. The sinking of this ship has created widespread disquiet in India. Just 2 weeks ago, the sailors of this ship were marching through the streets of Visakhapatnam in southern India, and that fleet, that parade was reviewed by the President of India. Now, yes, technically and legally, the American action may have been something that India could do nothing about. But there has been a great deal of discomfort at what has happened. In the meantime, Dubai, Bahrain, other cities in the Gulf continue to be under target from Iranian missiles. Bahrain's state-run refinery came under missile attack. And now there are serious concerns about what this war, especially if it's protracted, might do to the price and the supply chain of oil and energy. Is this war turning out to be Donald Trump's gravest mistake? Politico in the United States of America is reporting that the Pentagon is prepared for this war to carry on till September. If that happens, will there be any part of the world left unscathed? And what might be the consequences for the world order as we understand it now, if there is indeed a world order that we understand anymore? Let me welcome our panel of very distinguished voices, great experts on the program today. I first want to welcome to the program naval veteran, Rear Admiral Sudhir Pillai. If I can welcome him to the program. Welcome, sir. There's a lot to talk about when it comes to what happened with the downing of the Iranian warship in the Indian Ocean region, and I welcome you to the program. Ambassador Navdeep Suri is with us. He's somebody who spent a lot of time in the region that is now at the epicenter of this conflict, has an excellent piece out in the Tribune today with a very, very compelling title, which says the inmates are running the asylum, and more on that when we get into the conversation. Joining us from the United States of America today is Afreen Akhtar. Afreen is with the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. Thank you, ma'am, for your time. And also joining us on the program today, I want to welcome Velina Shakarova. She is geopolitical strategist and the founder of FACE. She was supposed to be in India for the Raisina dialogue, but like so many others, couldn't get on to a flight. Global aviation is only one of the many sort of spaces that has taken a knock with this conflict. Thank you very much, everybody. I want to start by playing out the latest statement from the American President Donald Trump. If we are worried, he's not, at least not overtly. He's talking about Cuba being next. Nobody seems to have reminded him of the Bays of Pigs and the failed American foray into Cuba in 1961. He's insisting that Cuba is going to be next. Let's take a look at Trump's latest comment.
I'm once again calling on all members of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, the military, and the police to lay down their arms. They're only going to be killed. And now is the time to stand up for the Iranian people and help take back your country. You're going to have a chance after all these years to take back your country. Accept immunity. We'll give you immunity. And we'll be giving you really the right side of history, because that's what it is. So you'll be perfectly safe with total immunity, or you'll face absolutely guaranteed death. And I don't want to see that. They don't want to see it either. We also urge Iranian diplomats around the world to request asylum and to help us shape a new and better Iran with great potential. It's a country with great potential. There's much better future for Iran. It's now beginning. It's going to be, I think, a great future. And the United States will ensure that whoever leads the country next, Iran will not threaten America or its neighbors, Israel, anybody.
So Iran is not backing down. The Iranian foreign minister went on NBC News, daring America to send in ground troops. And here in Delhi at the IRIS Dena dialogue, Iran's deputy foreign minister had this quip, this swipe for Donald Trump. Take a look.
President Trump is asking for change in the leadership of Iran, and he says that I have to have voice on that, while he cannot appoint even the mayor of New York. Can you imagine this colonial approach, that he would like to see democracy at home, but he would like to topple down a democratically elected president of Iran and assassinating other countries? So this is the path that they are going, and this is the heroic, resistance that we are doing. And the other path is inclusion.
All right, I want to start with you, Afreen, if I may. This doesn't seem to have an end game in sight. It doesn't even seem to have a script for one. How is this being debated within the United States of America? Is there a pushback beginning? There have been now American casualties. We've seen very heated exchanges at White House press conferences, even on what the reportage of these last rites should be for fallen soldiers of the U.S. services. What is going on? And with political reporting that the Pentagon is preparing for this to carry on till September, I mean, this sounds, frankly, sorry to be impolite, it sounds absolutely crazy.
I'll be honest, Barkha, it is absolutely crazy. And to your question about what the end game is, there isn't one. And we know that because the administration has, throughout the process of this war, described very different goals. One is ending Iran's nuclear program. One is triggering regime change. Another is deterring an imminent attack, which I think has been debunked by many in the political community. But fundamentally, those are three different wars with three different strategies and three different end states. And if you can't define the objective, you can't define the end state. So what you're seeing in Washington is a really rigorous debate. I mean, I think members of Congress, particularly Democrats, have come out generally uniformly opposed to the war, while Republicans are falling in line. We'll see if those political factions continue as this war progresses, with really no timeline in sight.
And is there public sentiment? Is there public appetite? Or is that too hard to say at this moment?
There's actually been widespread public opposition before the war started. Majorities of the American public believed that not only should the president not strike Iran, Congress needed to authorize military force against Iran. So as a part of the US system, our Congress needs to authorize military force for sustained military engagement in the world. There is no authorization of military force against Iran. So you're seeing widespread public opposition before the strikes happened, and that has very much sustained as this war has ensued. And right now there's some more support amongst Republicans. Democrats and independents are widely opposed to this war. And if we see a continuation of rising energy prices, if we see more American casualties, if we see more civilian casualties, obviously there have been hundreds of civilian casualties thus far, including at an elementary girls' school. I expect even amongst Republicans, that support will begin to fray. So the longer this goes on, the more the public will be opposed to this.
Well, I'm glad that you've mentioned the girls' school, because the New York Times has latest reporting actually says that their investigation, based on talking to sources, believes that the girls' school was indeed hit by U.S. strikes. There was a naval base right next to the school, and that base was the target. And therefore, indeed, prima facie, it appears that this is a result. Those heartbreaking images of schoolgirls having been killed was indeed the consequence of US strikes. And we'll come back to that tragedy a little later. I want to bring in Ambassador Suri, but just talking about oil prices, just taking a look at the oil price, oil has topped $89 a barrel on Brent. So this is already starting to happen. Qatar has halted the production of LNG. That could lead to supply cuts of up to 40% to India alone. Trump, who was obsessed with this idea of India's purchase of Russian oil, has suddenly announced a waiver. Nobody knows why he's announced a waiver all of a sudden, because actually India had not yet halted the purchase of Russian oil. Ambassador, if we can also bring up Ambassador Suri's column today in the Tribune, which I urge everybody to read. The inmates are running the asylum. Afreen Akhtar from Carnegie agrees. There's no plan. There's no plan. I don't know what that means really for the world order as we understand it. Ambassador Suri, over to you.
Yeah, I mean, what I was trying to say in the column is exactly what Afreen has also said, that there is this dense fog in Washington. And I was asking that, is this like a brain fog that is enveloping the senior members of the administration? Because every day you hear contradictory words coming out of the vice president, the president, the secretary of state. It seems sometimes that the president has made up something on the go, and then the rest of the team is trying to find a post facto justification of what he might have intended in real words. The more I hear of what's going on, the more it seems that the intent is towards regime change. Mm-hmm. And that is such a disastrous idea. It just shows a misreading not only of the history of past experience in Libya, Afghanistan, Iraq, everywhere, but also a misreading of Iran as one of the oldest civilizations, as a country that has been defined as a state for almost 500 years uninterruptedly. At least, from the 16th century, you can trace these borders on a map that have more or less existed. And there's a sense of pride that has outlasted emperors and kings and invaders and others in their own history and culture and language and everything else. So really, I think what we are seeing is Washington on the cusp of another historic blunder. And this time, unfortunately, the consequences are not limited to Washington alone. Many of us will end up paying the price for it, and price not just in terms of oil, but in terms of the looming shortages that we are already beginning to hear about of LNG, of LPG, of essentials for low-income households. The war is being fought somewhere else, and the impact is somewhere else. And the Americans, at least in these terms, will be insulated. I was reading a statement by one of the most prominent Dubai-based businessmen saying, "You asked us to join the Board of Peace. You asked us to contribute to the Board of Peace. Is this what you're using your money for, our money for? Shouldn't you have at least asked us our opinion before you embarked on this misadventure?" So there is all of this. And I think, particularly for America's allies in the Gulf, this is a deeply troubling moment where their whole model of economic prosperity, predicated on stability and on security, is today being challenged by these events. So there are just so many ramifications of what Washington is doing. I just hope that there are some adults in the room, and it isn't, as I said, it isn't just the inmates who've taken over the asylum, and everybody's trying to stay away from them because you don't want to mess with these guys on the loose.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we'll explore that in a little more detail as we go along. I want to bring in Rear Admiral Sudhir Pillai now, because this war has always had consequences for India with, nearly 10 million Indians in the Gulf, and also oil trade directly impacting us, oil prices, energy supplies. But Admiral Pillay, I want to talk to you about what happened with the Iran warship. I think for the last 48 hours, there has been real disquiet in India. And I understand this is war. I'm not a military person, but I have spent my life as a journalist reporting on and from conflict zones. I understand wars are ruthless. I understand there's no space for sentimentalism in war. But when we think of the fact that the sailors on board the IRIS Dena were marching through the streets of Visakhapatnam, if we can show that parade, and they were here as part of the fleet review. They were here as our guests. Most of these men are now at the bottom of the Indian Ocean, and this ship was heading back. After its time in India, it was, yes, I agree, not in Indian waters. It was strictly in international waters. Technically, legally, there was nothing we could have done. The Navy has now shared details of how it supplemented and immediately responded to the distress signal received in Colombo. The INS Tarangini, maritime aircraft were deployed. So all of those things we did. But there's a sense of disquiet and something not feeling right, that a US nuclear sub is right in our backyard, acting with unilateralism, acting with impunity, with us not even in the know. How do you feel about it as a naval veteran, sir?
Yeah, having sailed these waters, I think the reality of a multi-power presence in Indian Ocean is very real. And, we know that units like the nuclear submarine act in a very stealthy manner. Couldn't have just been that nuclear submarine. There would have been cooperating units, possibly a satellite system, probably maritime patrol aircraft like the P-8 Poseidon. So it's there. It's very much there. And when war comes to our back door, these kind of scenarios will come about and will affect all of us. But it's like you say, there's a disquiet in India. I think it's because of this very emotional connect we have with the fact that this was a ship returning from the IFR in Vizag. Its next port of call, as I read, is Kochi. It would have been maybe a bunkering.
For refueling, yeah. I believe it had to go to Kochi. Yeah.
That's right. That's right. And here, yes, it was in the high seas technically, and was a legitimate target as per the laws of armed conflict at sea. But then, there is a disquiet about this, and it really opens up a Pandora's box on our seas as open and freedom of navigation. Is it actually so relevant? It is not. I think in such cases, we see that naval power can be brought to bear, and it can really affect not just a ship or its crew, but it's actually affecting stability in a larger sense. And the economic aspects of it is something that time will tell. If it's a short war, it's going to be short. I'm not so bothered about the way the prices of oil will go up, but it's the supplies, the assurance of supplies, the seas being kept open, which is very important. And every such sinking, people talk of insurance around the Gulf of Hormuz and thereabouts. I think insurance will go up in various other routes also, which bring energy and flows into India and such other places. So this is a larger issue here.
Yeah, I think you raise an excellent point about whether the seas can even be kept open. From an Indian perspective, there's an estimated 23,000 seafarers on India-flagged vessels as well as foreign vessels who could be stuck right now as we speak. So really, we're talking about a cataclysmic consequence for the world. I want to bring in Velina now. Velina, you have been arguing that this isn't going to end anytime soon. There are others who believe that, Trump will need a face saver. He'll go for a face saver. He'll face a domestic backlash. But your sense from everything I've been reading, from your comments on social media, is that this could be protracted. What's your take?
Well, as my co-panelists have already highlighted, there is no clear agenda when this war started, and war goals are changing by the day, and that is a strong indicator for you that this war, even if at the beginning, in the initial phase, was meant to last probably a few days. Remember, we had another leader who also announced that his war will last only a few days. And we are meanwhile in the 5th year. And I mean, of course, the Russian war against Ukraine. Here, in the initial phase, probably the calculus was for this war to last 1 to a few weeks. Meanwhile, there are also statements pointing to that line of September. Anything that goes beyond the, let's say, 5-6 weeks is already very bad news domestically for the US administration, because it will backfire significantly in terms of inflationary impact, in terms of oil and gasoline prices. And voters do not vote on the scoring agenda of an US administration abroad. Voters always, actually take the decision based on the way how their household is being affected. So all in all, I think the major issue here is the gap between the strategic ambitions of this administration when they started to make a move on Iran and the reality. There is a major gap. When they started this war, I think that they had something in mind similar to the extraction mission in Venezuela, that they would, in this case, actually
Well, that's what I was going to ask you, Velina. Technically, Trump could have ended this with the killing of Khamenei. He could have said, like he did in Venezuela, it's not like he managed to bring some big change in Venezuela. He took the leadership out, he brought them to America, and Venezuela carries on just the same. He could have, at the killing of Khamenei, said, okay, I've done what I had to, now it's up to the Iranian people, he could have ended it there. He didn't. Why do you think that is?
Because of reality. Iran is not Venezuela. It's a very different scale of and scope of country, networks in the region. Iran has the very strong backing of China and Russia. Different scale again. I mean, Venezuela is a hub for Chinese and Russian influence, but this is a very different scale. And Iran has, as we are observing, also all these mechanisms and multi-layered modes of governance which are functioning. So they have decapitated the top of the political prism, if you like, I mean the pyramid, but actually below everything is still functioning, and that's the reality. So again, the gap between ambitions and reality is hitting back, is firing back at the US administration. And now, of course, they can announce a victory every day. That would be absolutely possible. But the point here is what's the end goal? I argue that there is a huge mismatch between the Israeli and the American end goals in this game as well. Regime change was not necessarily on the agenda of the US administration. Again, the way how the Israelis want to do that, if they are going to strike every next leader who is being announced, whether it's the supreme leader or whether it's political leader, you understand that the US administration would need a partner to sign any agreement, any ceasefire or whatsoever, which would not be possible. Second point I want to make is that, and we should not ignore this, I think that part of the calculus, and of course we are in the speculatory environment here, so we are just reading the puzzle pieces, nothing more than that. But I think that there was a major calculus here also to remove Iran from this, bigger great game ahead of the US-China summit, ahead of, the major competition that's on the horizon between the Americans and the Chinese in all terrains. And they, I think, really thought that it's possible to change the leadership, to turn it into more pro-Western kind of leadership, to make Iran play along, similarly to what happened with Venezuela, for the sake of actually weakening China in the long run, which obviously, once again, backfired.
So let me pick up this excellent point that you make about Israel and American goals not being the same. And I want to take that to Afreen Akhtar of Carnegie. Even sections of the MAGA base are criticizing Trump for this. You've got Marjorie Taylor Greene, Megyn Kelly saying, why is America fighting this war on behalf of Israel? Why aren't there more voices from the Republican base asking that question, Afreen?
Because I think it's a fair question is the answer, Barkha. In a moment of candor, Secretary of State Rubio admitted that the United States went into this war because They had credible intelligence that Israel was going to attack Iran, and that would have implications for U.S. forces in the region. So what does that mean? That fundamentally means we went into this war at the behest of Israel, specifically Prime Minister Netanyahu. And regime change has fundamentally been his objective of Iran for the last 20, 30 years. And this gets to your earlier question as well, Barkha. I don't think it would be fundamentally acceptable for Netanyahu to see a regime remaining in place in Iran after the killing of Ayatollah Khamenei. That's why this war is continuing beyond what we saw in Venezuela. You can't just take the leader out and leave the regime in place, because fundamentally that remains an existential threat to Israel in the eyes of Netanyahu. And so I think that's really behind it. And what you're seeing is the Republican Party, which has historically been a stalwart of Israel, Netanyahu's greatest ally in the United States, really beginning to question some of that. The United States also provides, by law, $3.8 billion in military assistance to Israel per year. And there are increasing numbers of people on both the left and the right that are questioning that. You know, Israel is a wealthy country. It has a very complex and advanced defense industrial base. In fact, their defense industrial base competes with American defense firms in global markets. And, you know, whereas U.S. military assistance to Israel was initially meant to help Israel defend itself in the region, over the decades that we've provided it, we've seen Israel become much more capable, and ultimately, within the last couple of years in particular, become an aggressor in the region. So the roles have reversed, and David is no longer fighting Goliath. In fact, Israel is now Goliath in the region.
That's so interesting. Ambassador Suri, if I may ask you to talk about how you think the Gulf countries might react. As you said, there is this viral letter written now by a UAE business leader to Trump, an open letter to Trump saying, what the hell, right? But my question is a little more fundamental. Why are they not pushing back? They have the leverage. They have the leverage with the United States of America to say, you need to stop this now. This is devastating our cities. This is devastating our countries. How does it suit them to have Trump carry on this madness?
So, Barkha, if we go back, say about 10 years or so, when the JCPOA was signed, the nuclear deal during Obama's time, the Gulf countries were extremely unhappy because they saw Iran at that time as an existential threat. And they worried about Iran's proclivity to meddle in their internal affairs, to use Shia communities in countries like Bahrain and Saudi Arabia as a bridgehead for fomenting unrest. And they were very unhappy that Obama and the sort of P5+1 went ahead and signed an agreement without any Arab state on the table when it directly impacted them. Then things started changing over the last 3 or 4 years. And I think two things were happening. One, the Gulf states realized that they can't depend so much on America, particularly when it comes to Iran. They want to make their own peace with Iran. And over the last 3 years, you saw Saudi Arabia restore diplomatic relations, Emiratis sending an ambassador back, and at least a serious attempt to manage a relationship with a large neighbor. Alongside, there was this feeling that perhaps a very belligerent Israel is now becoming a more serious threat than a weakened Iran. And I think all of these factors were playing into the calculus of the Gulf countries. Today, many friends that I've spoken to, they say that we feel completely let down by America for what it has done. We oppose this war. We kept saying that we oppose this war, and yet this war has been brought up on our heads. Today, where does it leave them? One, they realize that they didn't have the leverage in Washington that they thought they did, that Trump will still take their billions and do whatever he pleases to do. And second, that they still despite Iran's aggression against them, will have to find a way to live with Iran, looking at the longer term. And so you see this dilemma being played out, where you have statements saying we reserve the right to respond, but actually there has been no practical
But
action.
what if they were to say, as UAE has said, that we will not allow our territory to be used for aggression against Iran?
They said this anyway early, but that doesn't prevent the Americans from overflying and using their airspace. And I don't see any Emirati or Qatari shooting down an American fighter plane over its airspace.
Yeah.
So I think implicitly or explicitly the support does go on. But it is extremely troubling for them to find themselves in this situation. And particularly UAE as a country that I know rather well, they've tried to manage this. They've actually managed to interdict more than 92% of the incoming projectiles. But even 5 out of 100 coming through is 5 too many, and it disrupts that, cracks that carefully built image of stability and safety that they nurtured so assiduously over the years.
Yeah. Rear Admiral Pillay, if I may bring you in on the seas, you spoke about the impact on the movement, the supplies. We also need to talk about the safety of, sailors. What concerns you the most? And what concerns you the most with, again, I want to turn our attention back momentarily to the ship that went down. The fact that the Americans can come in, do this, say that, it was quiet death. It does also raise concerns for our sphere of influence. How much can we really push back against a hegemon? Trump is determined to be a hegemon, and that's what we're really up against.
Yeah, I think one thing that's very clear about Indian policies in recent times is this non-aligned policy that we maintained. The way I look at it today, vis-a-vis these states in the Gulf who have aligned very closely with the US, I think they're in a much better place today. And let's even talk about Israel and the US. There is clearly the escalatory logic. I don't think the US has under control. Israel seems to be controlling it. And under these circumstances, as a military person, I would be seriously worried about how do you set the military aims when these political objectives are not too clear or they are changing. So under these circumstances, there will be instability, supplies, shipping. They will all be affected by the kind of instability that prevails. And it'll only mean to not just the prices going up, but flows will actually stop, will slow down. A few weeks, we can brazen it out. But if it goes on for more than a month, I would think countries like India will really be in a tough place. And that's the kind of a scenario we need to get avoided. Trump has spoken about 4 weeks or so. But will this escalatory logic, this logic differential between Israel and US, will it lead to this 4 weeks extending further? Then it can be a very tricky place.
You make an excellent point, sir, about the escalatory ladder. Who's in control? Is it the Pentagon? Is it Netanyahu? And you say you think it's Israel.
Yeah, so there is, just a while earlier in my Substack, I looked at this from very theoretical terms, and what I figure is that when you have in alliance theory, this business of US and Israel having the act together is very, very tricky. And one person's political objectives can be very different from the other person's political objective. And if they're not together, which is what I see the case is, then you are in a very, very tricky space, and military aims will suffer. You can bring in the biggest armada in history, but that is not going to settle things. We need to be looking for an off-ramp. And my worry is that off-ramp is not visible. We need an off-ramp, and we need to find it quickly.
Velina, you first flagged this gap between the goals of Israel and the United States of America. Now everybody's agreeing with you. The Admiral says the off-ramp isn't visible. I don't think it's visible to anybody. But actually, you made the point that at any point, Trump could convert the moment into an off-ramp. He could say, we've had back channel offers for negotiations, we're going to talk. Or we've done what we want to, the Iran military is defanged, we're ready. he's not taking that off ramp, and we don't know what's actually driving him. Is it ego? Is it I don't know. What is it? We don't actually know. Yes, it's Israel's political agenda, or military agenda, but beyond that, I mean, we can't say Trump is powerless in the hands of Netanyahu. So do you look at this as a 4-week window, or do you look at this as longer?
I argue that we are still in the initial phase of the war, and this is the escalatory phase of the war, which has many layers, and these layers are developing simultaneously. So, of course, on the military dimension, we can claim that the U.S. is having more or less, success, military success, with the airstrikes, with the decapitation of the Iranian leadership, with operations. But let's be clear that airstrikes are not capable of basically bringing about regime change on the ground. I cannot point to any single example of such case without boots on the ground. I argue that boots on the ground in this particular case would be an absolute red line. Not only for the Americans, they will not only, if you consider the inauguration speech of Trump. Remember when he claimed that he would be a peace president. So it will be detrimental to the very interest of this administration, and why this administration was actually.
But what about proxies? What about proxies?
Like the Kurds? Proxies. Exactly. And again, here, main goal for the US administration with the Houthis, with the Hezbollah, was now actually not achieved. On the opposite, they have been again reactivated. We see clearly actions on behalf of Hezbollah. Probably the Houthis will be again activated in the Red Sea after the ceasefire that Trump administration was able to kind of agree on. The Iraqi militia are active. We are having a full spectrum of operations, multi-layered operations here. It's really not just about Iran. So in that sense, you cannot plan with few days or let's say few weeks in this current scenario. I think that the US administration is still betting on base case scenario, which is that Iran runs out of missile and drone capabilities. Because the moment when Iran runs out of these capabilities, the leadership is no longer going to be able to inflict any pain, any damage on US assets in the region, as well as on US allies. And that would be base case scenario. But we do not know for sure how long Iran is able to fight. Yeah. So I wouldn't bet on, again, the 3-4 weeks, what actually the base case is of this administration.
All right. We do have to close. Ambassador Suri, if you want a quick last word there on Iran running out of munitions, will other countries get involved more actively? Will the Chinese and the Russians step in more actively than just rhetoric? Could we unmute Ambassador Suri? Hang on, sir. I can't hear you. Yeah.
One keeps seeing. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
One keeps seeing reports about Chinese providing real-time intelligence that is enabling the Iranians to target their weapon systems a lot more accurately than they could during the war last June. I'm sure our friends in Washington and in Europe might have a better read on that. But, I'm just reminded, Barkha, as far as the timelines are concerned, I'm reminded of what the Taliban used to say. They would say to the Americans, you have the watches, but we have the time. And so if the Iranians take the view that time is on our side, we can stay here. It's our country. We are here for the long haul. You decide how long you want to be involved in. Then it puts a very different perspective on it.
It really does, but a very sobering, a grim perspective. Someone has to, as you said, Ambassador Suri, be the adult in the room in the White House and make Trump see what this is doing to the world. America has made many historic blunders with regime change attempts. Trump won't be the first president to have made that blunder, but as has been pointed out by a panel, this blunder has consequences for literally large parts of the world. We'll have to leave it there. Thank you very much to Ambassador Suri, to Afreen Akhtar, to Velina Shakarova, and to Rear Admiral Sudhir Pillai. Thank you. And to our audience, thank you. And see you all very soon. It's great to see you here. Thank you for watching our work. If you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to click the bell icon and subscribe to Mojo Story and support independent, robust journalism.